7 years from here on cause major destruction of the human nervous system that could be stopped at a switch. We could have a clean world tomorrow.
The deepest and most untraveled wilderness has always been my sanctuary. And when I trek there alone and in solitude, I feel most connected to the whole. I marvel at the complexity and the miraculousness of life, the countless forms of it. I try to contemplate the endless and seemingly impossible factors that were necessary for life to exist and flourish on this spinning ball of rock in the harsh and hostile environment of space. A ball of rock with its own magnetic shield, with its own moon that stabilizes its orbit, that orbits a life-giving star at just the right distance, with miraculous atmospheric layers that, for unimaginably long spans of time, have facilitated countless forms of life. How wondrous it all is, each part. A dragonfly, a tree, a bird, a whale, the sunrise, millions of tons of water magically floating through the sky in the form of spellbindingly beautiful clouds, bringing life-giving rain. When I witness the destruction of this miraculous web of life, I can only think of returning to the front line of the battles to sound the alarm. Reaching a critical mass of awareness in the population is the only way forward in this fight.
The challenges we face are immense. The odds are against us. But as the proverb goes, it's not over till it's over. Any one of us could be the final pebble that triggers the landslide of awakening.
So I want to get straight into it, but just for context, Geoengineering Watch indicates that there are two primary ideologies driving climate modification, and this is solar radiation management and carbon dioxide removal. Just for context, can you briefly walk me through these concepts?
Well, again, with CDR, that's another subject completely that we do not deal with, and we see no technology that has any viability whatsoever in that arena. But our primary objective at geoengineeringwatch.org is to expose to the public programs that have been fully deployed for decades with no public disclosure, no environmental impact reports whatsoever. And that's with solar radiation management, cloud albedo enhancement, stratospheric aerosol injection. Those are all the science names that are applicable to what's going on in our skies that the entire so-called climate science community continues to pretend are just proposals. And when we have film footage of these operations occurring up close, taken at altitude, nozzles visible, turning on and off, we have lab tests from all over the world that show the exact same elements named in climate engineering patents showing up in our precipitation. And geoengineeringwatch.org, not yet, actually at tremendous expense and difficulty, acquired a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab, put top scientists in it, went to altitude, sampled what heavy aircraft were emitting in our skies, processed those samples at one of the world's most renowned labs, Rensselaer Polytechnic University, found exactly what we knew we'd find, climate engineering elements. So there's no speculation. These operations are absolutely going on. And back to your question, primary objectives, weather is being used as a weapon at this point. It's a very valued weapon by those in control because they can blame it on nature. And also the psychological aspect of this, when they can engineer cool down events, as they're doing in the US right now on an extraordinary scale with chemical ice nucleation for weather modification, seeding clouds with chemical ice nucleating elements that create an endothermic reaction, which creates a cold, dense layer of air that descends to the surface and lowers temperatures dramatically, even turning what should have been liquid precipitation into frozen. They're literally engineering winter. And in doing so, they can affect psychologically people's perspective on the state of the climate and state of the environment, in addition to using weather as a weapon.
Your story, how you came to investigate climate and the irregularities that became apparent. I only know a few details, but it's almost quite serendipitous. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, certainly. I never, ever intended to spend the last 20 years of my life in such a battle. I'm not politically oriented and have never been an activist of any type. I wanted to get into a region of clean air, having grown up in Southern California and the smog there. And when I finally got to Northern California, off-grid wilderness location, off-grid home with solar, wind, and hydropower, expecting to find clean air here. But I began to lose massive amounts of my solar uptake from whatever these aircraft were emitting. I mean, extraordinary amounts, 60, 70, 80% on some days when these aircraft emissions could cover the entire sky. I knew that could not be condensation blocking 60, 70, 80% of my solar power production. I began to test my precipitation, hoped I would not find climate engineering elements in it, starting with aluminum, but I did. I continued to test. The amounts of aluminum in my precipitation continued to escalate radically in lockstep with what these aircraft were emitting. And I was simply forced, after I began to do extensive research and finding extraordinary amounts of material that no one had covered from a media standpoint, government documents, Senate documents on this subject, I was forced to face the fact that climate engineering operations were indeed going on and not being disclosed. There's an illegal federal gag order at this point on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. Why would you gag the weathermen if you weren't hiding something massive? So knowing this was going on, Nadia, I just had no choice from a standpoint of my conscience but to address this issue and try to gain public disclosure.
You conducted
Disclosure.
On that point, the test that you conducted, you knew what elements had been named in climate engineering patterns, and that's what you were looking for. So other than aluminum, what did you find? And how did you know that it was there as a result of climate engineering operations?
Well, when we have an aircraft sampling what another heavy aircraft is emitting in the skies, that could only be from one source. So there's no speculation at that point. There's no hypothesis or theory. And on the aluminum itself, again, primary element named in climate engineering patents, stratospheric aerosol seeding for reduction of global warming. That's the name of one of the patents. I attended an international climate engineering conference with the world's most recognized geoengineer, Dr. David Keith there. It's on film on the record, and in the film, The Dimming, which you mentioned earlier, available for free on the homepage of Geoengineering Watch. And at that symposium, the world's most recognized geoengineer, Dr. David Keith, stating their intent to dump tens of millions of tons of aluminum into the atmosphere. Why aluminum? Because aluminum is reflective. That's the stated goal of solar radiation management, to deflect some of the sun's incoming thermal energy to slow down global warming. And at the end of this presentation by Dr. Keith, again on film on the record, they only allowed, I believe, 2 questions. I was one. I asked him, had any environmental impact studies been done about human toxicity, toxicology studies, environmental or human? And his answer was no. And his final statement was, could terrible things happen tomorrow? We don't know. What kind of a statement is that from the world's most recognized climate engineer and their proposal to dump tens of millions of tons of aluminum in the atmosphere? And in fact, so much aluminum has come down in our precipitation here in Northern California that it's changed soil pH values extraordinarily. We have the original government baselines from well over a half century ago. So we're not guessing. It's killing everything here. Our forests are dying, insects are dying, and we know that this aluminum is in the precipitation because we continue to test, not just aluminum, barium, strontium, graphene, polymer fibers. The list is long, all of it toxic.
I think I recall, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if you spoke in jest about the fact that, we don't know how many lives will be lost as a result of these, elements being injected or into the environment, but it might be very small compared to the effects of climate change. It was a very, almost, for lack of a better word, irresponsible thing to be said by someone that people look to as a world expert on things.
I completely agree. Completely agree with you. The cavalier manner in which they discuss dumping this toxic material into our atmospheres and then grossly underestimate the mortality rate is inexcusable. Who gave them the right to do this? Who gave anyone the right to interfere with the Earth's weather systems and claim that they know best what's best for us, what's best for the planet, which couldn't be further from the truth. And if we look at the very premise, Nadia, of solar radiation management, to put these light scattering particles in the sky, we now have recent peer-reviewed study to prove that this can only create temporary toxic cooling at the cost of an even worse overall warming, destruction of the ozone layer, total disruption of the hydrological cycle, and complete contamination of virtually everything on the surface. So when we have this much metal coming down on us, again, based on their estimates and based on our extrapolations from rain samples and the amount of aluminum in those samples, we're talking about tens of millions of tons in the case of aluminum annually sprayed into our skies. Is it any wonder that Alzheimer's, dementia, ALS, and countless other forms of neurological degenerative diseases are going off the charts? We're inhaling this material with every breath we take, and no one in the climate science community, so I don't even want to call them scientists, because this omission of blatant, glaring, verifiable truth is absolutely criminal. They don't deserve to be called scientists, Nadia. And this destruction of the planet's natural life support systems is absolutely criminal. Too many people that are now so programmed that they ignore what they see with their own eyes. When you can look at the skies and see an aircraft leaving a trail from horizon to horizon, which is not condensation. I want to stress that these are not condensation trails. These are particulate dispersions. And we see them turning on and off. We have film footage of them turning on and off. We have up-close photographs of the nozzles, retrofit nozzles mounted on the wing pylons, aimed into the exhaust jet stream to make it look like, quote, condensation.
There was also an expert in the dimming that said that what's coming out of airplanes is not a natural result of the way in which fuel burns.
Numerous experts in the dimming said that. For your listeners to know a little bit about the dimming, there's U.S. Air Force generals stating on the record that these operations are going on. There's former government scientists stating on the record, former Canadian Minister of Defense. And yes, it does not behave in that way, especially when we consider, as far as the, quote, condensation trail lie, we have all military tankers and all commercial carriers fitted with what's known as a high bypass turbofan jet engine. That is a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through that engine is not combusted. That engine by design is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have up-close film footage of these aircraft at altitude, nozzles visible, turning on and off. End of discussion. It's not condensation. Yet, back to your original question, we have a population that is willing to ignore their own eyesight, their own sense of reason, and accept the official denial. And that's scary. And that's back to the psychological part of what you're describing. That's how programmed the population is at this point. And the fluoride in the water, the aluminum in the air, all of these elements are cognitively very destructive. And at what point do we glue all this together, add some programming, and we have a population that's simply ignoring this very near-term existential threat and accepting whatever they're officially told. And if that doesn't change, again, our outlook is grave, Nadia.
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there.
Perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
They shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, you know, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. You know, we're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
Most are unfamiliar with a science term called global dimming. That term refers to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet due to light scattering particles that are building up in the atmosphere. And although many of these particles are from industrialized pollution, the larger majority are from the ongoing climate engineering solar radiation management operations. This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine by design is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. These are historical films of what can be done with a biplane, a small biplane that carries a very small payload. And that much can be done. How much more can a fully loaded military tanker, KC-10, KC-135, C-17 Globemaster, how much more material can they put in the air? About 500 times more with a single tanker.
In regard to the condensation trail narrative, many refer back to the trails left by World War II bombers as proof that we are only seeing condensation trails in our skies. But geoengineeringwatch.org found on military archives film footage, which we posted, of World War II B-17s at altitude turning off a sprayed dispersion. We know that climate engineering was deployed immediately after World War II, so testing was absolutely ongoing. Clearly, these bombers were used for beta testing. Film footage proves it.
Weather was a weapon used over Vietnam.
The more the climate engineers spray the planet, destroy the ozone layer, disrupt the hydrological cycle, and increase the overall warming of the planet, the more they feel they have to ramp these programs up to try to mitigate some of the damage that these programs have done in the first place. That is the true definition of insanity.
As a society, we are like a freight train heading for a broken bridge that is just a few years away from us. And I think people don't understand the exponential increase of toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race. These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems in the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening the overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
Prachtige, natuurlijke blauwe hemel. Draai ik me om, dan zien we daar opeens tientallen strepen in de lucht. Tientallen. Dit is wat men noemt geoengineering, weather modification, cloud seeding. Dat zijn allemaal officiële termen ervoor. Dit is hoe ze het weer manipuleren. Tientallen vliegtuigen die allemaal vlak bij elkaar vliegen en die de hele lucht compleet volspuiten. Kijk daar eens naar. Het is toch niet te geloven. En het begint met een klein lijntje, zoals je daar ziet. Daar is een vliegtuig bezig. En dan zie je hoe het zich uitspreidt. In het midden zie je hoe het enorm breed als een deken, als een sluier over de hemel komt. En binnen enkele uren zal deze hele lucht compleet grijs zijn, compleet bedekt. En wat er dan uitvalt is kunstmatige regen of sneeuw. Want dit zijn chemicaliën, dit zijn miljoenen liters aan chemicaliën, miljoenen liters aan zware metalen. Wat er gebruikt wordt is onder andere aluminium, bromium, strontium en andere metalen. Die worden uitgespoten over de mensen die daar wonen. En zo bepalen ze het weer. En het erge is dat dit nog steeds door Wikipedia en door Google en Facebook wordt weggezet als een complottheorie. Maar ik wil je vragen, is dit een complottheorie? Is dit een complottheorie? Kijk daar eens naar. Is dit een complottheorie?
In order to stabilize world population, they need or want to dispose of 6.5 billion people.
Viewers, you don't know who the cameraman is.
No.
You don't know why you're being made to see these things. Nor do I. You're seeing me. I can't even see you. I may be dead by the time you watch this. Very possibly are. You don't know who's the man who's making things he wants you to see. Destroy your television sets now. You must listen to no orders. That's all I can tell you for this point of humanity.